what we saw in median price growth in Sydney in that particular time was 154%. There's precedent in history where we've seen it in Sydney, we've seen it in Beijing, we've also seen it in London. Brisbane's done incredibly well since 2019 to now, and it doesn't show any signs of stopping. But
they're talking about doubling again between now and 2032, and the Olympics being the primary driver of that. What's your view on that?
The founder of Property Strats, Steve Ash, brings nearly 2 decades of institutional experience from Goldman Sachs, State Street, and Australian Super to his 8-figure property empire. Joining him is Tom Clark, head of commercial at Property Strats, who has personally built a $25 million plus diversified portfolio spanning shopping villages, development projects, and residential holdings across metro and regional Australia.
We're going to be digging into Brisbane and the impact of the upcoming 2032 Olympics.
There are 100,000 odd jobs created just for the Olympic Games themselves.
If we look at the supply, there's not enough coming to market, not enough houses being built, and so where everyone's going to live, and we look at the population growth numbers, then yes, it's a very tightly held market. Anything that does come onto the market at the moment is fetching sort of 9 to 10 offers.
The Olympics was announced in 2021 and the average house price in Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast and Brisbane was around 700. Since it was announced, now combined on an average it's over $1 million. So tell me, in terms of the infrastructure, we're talking about that, there's a huge amount that's going to be spent, both federally and statewide. Now, what is that going to do to housing closer to those infrastructure precincts and closer to those venues? Are those markets going to outperform compared to the suburbs that are a little bit away from those new precincts? What's your view on that?
I think. Welcome to another edition of My Next Property. I'm Steve Ash. I'm the founder of Property Strats. I've built an $18 million property portfolio. I'm an ex-Goldman Sachs vice president. And I'm joined by Tom Clark. How are things?
Steve, good to be here again, mate. Thanks for having me. How are you going?
No, I'm very good, very good. I'm very excited about this episode. We're going to be digging into Brisbane and the impact of the upcoming 2032 Olympics and what we're going to see there.
Should be good, mate. We've bought heavily in Brisbane for our clients and ourselves, so looking forward to it.
Yeah. No, we have done. I know you've got commercial properties there yourself, and which they're doing really well, which we'll go into. And I've got quite a few properties there. Obviously, Brisbane's done incredibly well since 2019 to now, and it doesn't show any signs of stopping. But what I'm really excited about unpacking is there's obviously a lot coming in. We'll delve into this in a second with the Olympics. But is this, jet fuel growth going to continue? And we'll try and get into that in a little bit.
Well, it's doubled since 2019, right? So, and they're talking about doubling again between now and 2032, and the Olympics being the primary driver of that.
Well, in many areas it has doubled, but it varies from report to report. I saw a report a couple of months ago talking about 50% minimum growth, but certainly if we look at the supply, there's not enough coming to market, not enough houses being built, and so where everyone's going to live, and if we look at the population growth numbers, then yes, it's a very tightly held market, so we can see this trend going on, I would say.
And you look at just the jobs that are going to be created from the Olympics on top of the natural migration numbers.
Yeah.
There are 100,000 odd jobs created just for the Olympic Games themselves.
Yeah.
In Queensland alone, let alone all the jobs around Queensland.
Yeah. Just
big numbers.
Big numbers indeed, yeah. Nationwide, they're quite high, but 100,000 around Queensland, but clearly most of those are going to be centred around Brisbane.
I think so.
And we've got quite a number of big infrastructure projects that we're seeing at the moment. So one of them's across River Rail. That's a $17 billion project, so 5 stations. I believe there's a couple of current stations that will be upgraded, like new stations coming in, so there's a lot going on there. And then, of course, we've got the Olympic Stadium. And so what was it? I think the estimation about 58,000 people needed to build that stadium. I was reading a report.
Crazy numbers, Steve. Even just the Australian government and its contribution on top of the Queensland government's close to $5 billion.
Yep.
Then you've got the $7 billion on top of that for a lot of the other infrastructure around Brisbane.
Yes.
And even outside Brisbane as well. And yeah, huge numbers that'll just support that market for years to come. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're just talking about supply constraint issues. What we're seeing on the ground at the moment, any sort of property that's very desirable for owner occupiers or investment grade, if you will, because the properties are tightly held, anything that does come onto market at the moment is kind of fetching sort of 9 to 10 offers. So we keep thinking there's going to be a bit of a slowdown. There was a bit of a slowdown in Brizzy last year, but now with the rate cuts and then with the 5% grant and those caps going up in Brisbane to 1 million, it's really there to sort of like stoke interest from first home buyers. So first home buyers are going to come to the party in many of these markets. So in some of the areas that we're going to talk about anyway, regardless of what happens with the Olympics, there's a bit of a perfect storm still brewing in sort of Brisbane, but southeast Queensland in general. So very resilient market.
And we're seeing that, aren't we, with the explosion of house prices? Typically the units follow, and we're seeing some phenomenal growth in that area of the market right across the Brisbane precinct.
Well, yeah, we are. And one of the interesting things, I mean, I talked about this in the show the other day, and I get Tamales thrown at me quite a lot about the units. So you like throwing the Tamales at me as well, something a little bit more sort of vicious than that. But the unit growth in Brisbane in many suburbs over the last year has been phenomenal. If we look at sort of Cooperoo, real blue chip type suburbs, Ascot, up 20% plus. And really because that gap between, it's affordability at the end of the day.
It is.
So that sort of house price has gone away from units and then units looking really affordable.
Yep.
Someone like Annerley, for example, you could buy apartments at 250,000 in 2021 and now they're 650.
Yeah.
And so who says units don't grow?
Yeah.
And so really what we've seen is those house prices accelerate. I know you've got a few properties in Logan, they would have done quite well.
We both have, yeah, and we've got lots of clients in Logan. When we were talking about this prior to the pod, right, where we think that's going to go. We were talking $1 million. $1
million in Logan.
It's crazy, right? But
yeah.
I can see it happening.
Well, I mean, it already is happening, I think. In some of the suburbs, the median price is really picking up to that sort of point.
Yeah.
Like
imagine the days. Remember the days, $200,000-$300,000 in Logan? And that was only 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And now we're talking potentially $1 million housing.
Yeah.
Houses.
It is incredible. I mean, those lower sort of pocket areas in Logan, like Woodridge, for example, they were really that 200,000, 230,000.
Crestmead
and Crestmead, really that upper sort of like Market Marsden and Logan Lee, and then those top areas like Logan Home, sort of Bethania.
Yeah.
It has been remarkable. Slacks Creek. And really it's just so well positioned. It's a third of the way from Brisbane onto the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And, lots of commercial activity, a lot going on. The road is always jammed. Anyone who kind of lives in Brizzy, when you come out to go to the Gold Coast, you always get kind of stuck at Logan. But it is phenomenal what we're seeing.
And a lot of those houses, they were larger blocks. A lot of our clients bought them for the granny flats. A lot of them haven't done anything with that yet, but they've got that there ready to pull if they need to generate some additional income, right, out of their properties.
Well, there's actually a number of things you can do with so some of the properties that we looked at are the high sets. I mean, the great thing about the high sets in Brisbane and Logan and Moreton Bay or wherever it is, if you've got like the low level at 2.4 meters plus, you can convert that to dual living. Yeah. And so you could potentially almost have 3 incomes. You could convert that to a dual living, build a granny at the back, 3 incomes on one plot. So that's something that we've seen for people. Yeah. And still, and if we kind of look at, say, an example like that, if you're still picking up around that 700, 750 mark in one of these areas, you can do still, it's harder to find those kind of high set, very desirable, but there's opportunities still.
What's your view on that though? I mean, we spoke about that granny flat play 2-3 years ago when the yields were there to get that extra cash flow. Obviously now with the market, everything's gone up.
Yes.
The yield's not where it once was. A lot of people are now moving into a net yield environment through commercial, as we know.
Yes.
We're seeing a lot more activity within the property strats business for those clients.
Yeah.
Does it increase value of the asset, or is it detrimental to the value of the asset?
I think it's a lead.
I'm not sold on it personally.
It's a bit of a leading question.
And we're digressing from Brisbane, but just quickly talk to me about that.
No, digressing. We both think of the same thing here, and I think the granny flat is if you've tapped out of your portfolio and you can't buy any more, and you need a bit of cash flow, then a granny flat's a good opportunity to do something if you really can't do anything. But your money's much better spent increasing the portfolio. As soon as you put a granny in there, or if you did do that conversion to dual living, and I totally understand why people do it, but if you do it, obviously you cut out the owner occupiers down the track, or there might be some people who want that, but if you've got 2 kitchens, obviously that's a certain type of person, but like who's going to buy that property when you come to sell. Yeah. And so I'd only do it if you were really stuck on your portfolio and you needed to get that cash flow and you couldn't do a commercial or something.
So it does inhibit capital growth, basically.
In my opinion, it does. Yeah.
And I agree. I'm with you. Yeah. I mean, everyone was spruiking those 2-3 years ago, but I could never really wrap my head around it. I'm exactly the same as you. If you need that cash flow and you've got no other avenues to do it, look at it.
And if you want to see the outcome of that, go to West Sydney and have a look at all those properties on the market, all with granny flats that were built in 2010 to 2013 or whatever. And sort of, the capital growth numbers aren't much different to what a property would sell for there. So, but we do digress. I mean, it's an important topic, but.
Absolutely. So tell me, in terms of the infrastructure, we're talking about that. There's a huge amount that's going to be spent, both federally and statewide. Now, what is that going to do to housing closer to those infrastructure precincts and closer to those venues? Are those markets going to outperform compared to the suburbs that are a little bit away from those new precincts? What's your view on that?
Well, I think it will. And we've obviously talked about a couple of infrastructure builds. Obviously, the Olympic Stadium's the biggest one, and then the Cross River Rail. But if we go back and look at history and we look at kind of what happened in Sydney, the population growth was about 12% over that sort of 10-year time horizon. When the Sydney Olympics was announced, it was 2021, I think Brisbane was, the Olympics were kind of announced that they sort of, were successful in getting the, so we're just into that sort of journey as we go to 2032. And so what we saw in median price growth in Sydney in that particular time was 154%. So we use, obviously, no one knows what's going to happen in the future, but we obviously, there's precedent in history where we've seen it in Sydney, we've seen it in Beijing, we've also seen it in London, and how well sort of house prices have done during that sort of time. So with all this money going in, it's clearly going to be good for the economy. But what we can do is just to make it a little bit more relatable for readers, maybe we can break this down into sort of 3 residential areas where we see a bit of value. And then I'm going to sort of ask you a question, or I'll surprise you at the end, and then we can go into that.
So looking forward to it. Let's go.
So if we look at 3 areas, so the Olympic Stadium is going to be built in Vic Park. It's a long drawn out story in Brisbane. Initially, we were kind of looking at the Gabba and doing a sort of rejuvenation of that site. That got binned by Labor, and then there was talk, and it was crazy talk, but they were looking at Mount Gravatt for a period. There's no way you could have the Olympic. That would have been a disaster, I think.
Where was that coming from? That's crazy.
They were talking about there weren't enough funds to build the stadium, and it was just back and forth. And so they were looking at current sites and not wanting to spend too much money. Then Mount Gravatt got banded around, and sort of living not too far away from Mount Gravatt myself and going past it on the way to Garden City sometimes. Yeah, there's no way you could have that as the Olympic Stadium. And so we had the Liberals come in, David Crisafulli, then sort of made the quick decision, okay, this has got to be sorted out. And the site of Victoria Park has been announced for the new Olympic Stadium. It's very close to the CBD, around by Kelvin Grove. And so that's finally being announced. That's a massive boom. We can all move forward. And I think that's a really good site for that. So if we look at the first area, which I think is the obvious one that's going to benefit from Vic Park coming on board and having the Olympic Stadium there, are really the unit markets in the suburbs surrounding that. And, we're just talking about units, again, tomato throwing, whatever it will be. But still, if you get the units in those boutique blocks in the likes, and we're talking about blue chip suburbs here, the likes of, say, a Newmarket, a Kelvin Grove, Paddington's, everyone knows Paddington, lovely suburb, really good restaurants, etc. But if you can get those sort of, Hurston's obviously another one, but if you can get in those boutique blocks and you're able to pick up, say, a unit anywhere between, I don't know, 750 to 900, I think they'll do very well still. Just there's going to be so much coming to that area. So I think that's one area we can look at first. And you've also got sort of like the Olympic Village, I believe, is going to be sort of Bowen Hills, so that's fairly close. So we're going to see a lot of change there. And with the unit price changes that we've seen, I think that'll continue in some of these real blue chip suburbs.
Yeah, great. Yeah. All right, so that's more inner city type examples.
So that's an inner city play. We're going straight up. We're looking at the stadium play, and these are the areas. So we can look at a couple more. So the second one, we're going to go North Sydney now, and we've got the indoor sports centre being built in Petrie. So Petrie is a suburb. It's about, I think it's 19 k's north of the CBD. So it's sandwiched near Strathpine. It's generally it's an older type area with houses on big plots of land. There's a fast train line there to get to the CBD, so which goes once or twice an hour in the mornings. But there's been a lot of zoning changes there. You've had the next gen zone coming in there. But again, like you're picking houses up maybe around about that sort of 900,000 mark now. It's just crazy. Like these are about 450.
That's had nearly 100% growth over 5 years, 90% growth. Right?
100% growth. Yeah, indeed. But all around that area, I think North Town, and technically we're really more in Moreton Bay before someone pulls me up on that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to talk about those cities that are obviously close to Brisbane, and this one, with the kind of infrastructure going in there, you've also got zoning changes.
You're still at double-digit growth here in the last 12 months. Just looking at some numbers here, it's crazy.
Well, that's it. And the properties that we've been buying and the properties that we see. As anything that we go that's kind of on flat land, nice rectangular plot, snapped up straight away with, like, as I said, multiple groups, multiple offer sort of scenarios. So I think that particular area, Strathpine, you've had the next generation zoning coming in there. Yeah. And so potentially if you buy in the zone, you can build up, it depends where you buy, but multiple levels. And
it's fundamentally, the fundamentals of Petrie are what we like as well, right? It's got good levels of owner occupation.
Yes.
Up near 80%. The socioeconomic scores are good.
Yes.
And the housing statistics that we're looking at typically are pointing to, short, medium and long-term growth, right?
Yeah.
So the Olympics is just going to supercharge that.
It will supercharge it, and they're fairly cheap, affordable, like you say, they're starting to become quite desirable places to live in. There's lots of amenities there, good shopping centres. You've got the Strathpine Centre quite close by. as I said, the zoning changes, like lots of parks, etc. There's been a university open in Launton. I've forgotten the name. I'm having a mind blank now, but you've got that there. And then if you go up as well towards the likes of Callinga and North Lakes, North Lakes in particular is a nice area where you've got the Costco, the IKEA, shopping galore. So that whole pocket is really good.
Great. Well, that's a good analysis on that. What's the venues in Petrie?
So we've got the indoor sports centre going there. So we're obviously going to have the basketball, pickleball, which is the big thing at the moment, volleyball, etc.
You love your pickleball, don't you?
I do love my pickleball. I need to get that fitness as I sort of get elevated in age. But you think you've got the dream team are going to be sort of obviously playing ball over in Petrie. Who would have thought that? Sort of Michael Jordan back in 1990. So that's going to be a real boon.
Well, it's such good facilities though, post the Olympic Games, those sort of things, right? That'll just continue to just support the area.
Oh, yeah. No,
I mean, some of those in Sydney, I live in Sydney, as you know, but some of the facilities that they built back then, we always still use them, scattered across Sydney. So
absolutely.
Good investments.
It is. And having spent a bit of time in China, like, kind of Qingdao, which is, that's still kind of heavy marks from the Beijing Olympics, and then obviously London.
Yep.
A lot happening in East London there. So it's going to be amazing. I think anyone who kind of spends a bit of time in Brisbane, hasn't been there for a while, you come here, you've got the Star Casino open, you've got the South Bank. Just looks different every year.
Even just driving through the place, it's just all happening. You've got cranes everywhere, particularly between as you said before, the Logan to the Gold Coast area. It's just everything's going on right now, infrastructure-wise, isn't it?
There's a lot been going on. It's been happening for a long time, and it's exciting. You've got the old Eagle Street Pier. I haven't actually been there for a while, but that's all being rejuvenated. And as I said, the Star Casino, everything that's going on there, it's amazing. They built the bridge to Kangaroo Point and then across the South Bank, so it's much easier to get around. And South Bank's a really, really nice place to go and walk around. Even my brother, who's pretty picky, comes over from the UK.
Loves it.
And then, another pom. I know you love your poms.
Does he drink tea?
He doesn't. He drinks coffee.
Coffee?
Yeah, he's an extreme pom. So yeah, but he was blown away by, walk around South Bank, lights on the trees, lots of things to see. So
beautiful.
So that's the second one.
All right. What do we got next? Capalaba and Alexandra?
So we're going to go Capalaba and Alexandra Hills. So I think one of the most undervalued and overlooked areas around in Brisbane, or kind of proximity to Brisbane, I'll say, because I know it's a separate city, is Redlands Bay. Now, this area, I think, it always amazes me. People always look at Moreton Bay and Logan, and you've got somewhere like here. And the two suburbs I'm going to talk about are not going to be directly impacted by the Olympics. We've got the whitewater rafting happening in Birkdale, which is quite close to...
Just for those that aren't watching on YouTube, just explain where these locations are for me.
Yeah. So if you take the CBD, just think straight east. And so you could kind of, even though it's apples and oranges, but you just think in Sydney, if you're going right over to say Bondi, that's kind of like the same sort of direction you'd be heading towards. And you've got some pretty decent suburbs there like Manly, Wynnum, out that way. But if you keep going south of there, you hit Redlands Bay. It's where Birkdale's at the top of that. That's where the whitewater rafting is going to be. And it's a pretty big area. And so it's all coastal. Well, when I say coastal, there's not a beach there. It's more a pile of mud, I should say. But still, you've got water views, etc. And it's nice out there, and there's a lot going for it. And so the two suburbs, which I think so much value in, we've been buying quite a lot here over the last few years, are Capalaba and Alexandra Hills.
And the numbers are going to stack up on these beautifully, right, in terms of the metrics we typically look for?
Yeah. I mean, they're both quite high socioeconomic areas, but really what it boils down to is a few things. Like the houses are on decent plots. They're really nice. So you often buy on 700 to 800 square meters. Yeah. The sort of development considerations, they're pretty friendly in Redlands Bay. So it's quite, if you get the house at the front of the plot or a corner block, you can do subdivision. Development type projects have quite, a lot stacks up in that particular area. So that's good. You've got two of the best colleges in not just Brisbane, but Queensland. You've got Sheldon College and Ormiston College. So you've got very good schools. You've got the train line from Cleveland that goes all the way into the CBD. And then you've just got maybe a slight kind of price discount in the likes of Alex Hills and Alexandra Hills, I should say, and Capalaba. And the other good thing is the yields are a little bit better here. And so if you can pick up a house in that $900 to $950, you might be able to snag, say, a $800 a week rent. And we've been seeing rents increase in these areas. So there's a lot to like about these areas. And then one other thing I just wanted to say, I just mentioned Cleveland with the train line into the CBD. So house prices there are expensive. And then you've also got Raby Bay. I think I pronounced that Raby Bay, where you can get some very expensive properties, and you've got the like waterfront, the marinas there. So, I mean, it's just a really nice vibe to it. It's you've got good hospitals there, good shopping centres. There's a lot going on in the region. So I think they're undervalued anyway, but I think, you know, with some of the infrastructure spend and what's coming with the Olympics there, they stand to do well.
Right. Well, we talk about the impact of the Olympics, and let's just look at other things in terms of, okay, how this market's going to play out. Because we look at typically a market in terms of whether we like it or not based on, firstly, the economy. If it's a diversified economy, then there's always going to be a need for jobs, particularly if that's a growing economy, and clearly Brisbane's got that in spades.
Yes.
So that's going to create population growth, and it's going to create ongoing need for shelter, as we know. We have seen a doubling of the housing prices over the last 5 years. I think the Olympics was announced in 2021, and the average house price in Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast and Brisbane was around 700.
Yep.
Since it was announced, now combined on an average, it's over $1 million.
Yep.
Right? They're now talking about housing potentially going up by, did you say 50% between now and when the Olympics starts? On an average, there was a data set that was
I think it was Ray White
on that.
I
Someone announced it.
I think it was Ray White that came up with these kind of numbers, and obviously there might be a bit of a conflict of interest there, but you can clearly see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then we're talking about Logan as an example, potentially moving to $1 million house price average. Affordability.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that, because it's got to start hitting at some point, right?
Well, yeah, and it is a good point, and it's probably the one kind of number that sort of like does stand out, obviously, that some of these areas are becoming highly unaffordable for the local population.
Yep.
The way I look at it, touched on it a second ago, the 5% grant coming in, they've hit that, they've increased that cap up to $1 million in Brisbane. Can't remember what the cap was before. I think it was around a 600,000 mark or whatever, and it's usually applied to sort of new dwellings or whatnot. But here this is established dwellings that potentially first-time buyers can get on. And so it's going to be much easier for them to get loans. And we all know that if people take out these loans, they don't go, okay, I'm going to live within my means. I'm going to see what I can buy for 700, 750 and go to Crestmead or Marsden. They're going to go, if I can get up to $1 million and I can afford it, and I don't, you know, they're going to remove some of my borrowing criteria, I'm just going to get the best asset I can buy. And so just that alone, like, you know, people don't maybe think rationally about, okay, can I afford this property? They'll just go and do it. Yep. So with interest rates coming down as well, I think you've got a really good trifecta of sort of data points there, where you've got the grant, you've got rates coming down, and then you've got the Olympics sort of boom. And then if you couple that in with the supply constraints, they're still not building enough houses in Brizzy and Southeast Queensland in general. So there's going to be constrained supply, and that's kind of what's playing out. And not many people, you know, the hold periods in Brizzy are going up. People know that if they sell their property, they've got to somehow find somewhere else to go and live. And so stock's pretty tight. So that really, as I said before, the really good assets, you know, are commanding a premium. So while it might look unaffordable, it's going to continue just to grow up for these very reasons. A little bit similar to what we've seen in Sydney, of course.
Yeah. So it's a buy for you, Steve.
It's still a buy. It's still a buy for me. And I think if you're kind of, we've obviously talked about Melbourne on these potties and the value there. But if you do want and you don't have any sort of exposure to Brizzy or Queensland, then I think it's a good place to look at. But I've been taking some of the residential brunt on this, and I talked about something that we can give our viewers as well. So Tom Clark, I'm going to put you on the spot.
What's that, mate?
Commercial. So you tell me about the commercial opportunity in Brisbane, Logan at the moment.
Because of the Olympics? Well, it's an interesting point. I think it's going to impact both predominantly the industrial and the retail sectors.
Yeah.
And I think that you need to look at it in both a pre-event and a post-event type view. So pre-event, I think from an industrial perspective, you think about all of the things that need to get built, just the staging as an example, and all of the things that have to be created around those stages and all of those things that are needed within the stadiums. You're going to need industrial assets to produce those sorts of things, right? So there's going to be a lot of demand for those sort of things in the lead up to it, and also distribution hubs as well. So you think about all of the food that's going to be needed to be transported to all of the locations. You think about just the merchandise, right, that's going to be needed for the events, and medical stuff, even clothing for the athletes and for all of the employees of the events, right? How's that going to get made? Where's that going to be dispatched from? All of that's going to be needed to be handled through small and medium size, large size industrial assets, right? So there's going to be a huge amount of demand for that asset just from all of the things that the Olympics are going to absorb and require from these assets. And then clearly post the Olympic Games, you think about the money from the infrastructure that's been spent
Yeah.
on the arterial roads and all of the corridors and the transportation hubs,
Mm.
it's going to be a completely different place to live, right? And so if you have an industrial asset near where that investment's getting made,
Yeah.
right, suddenly your value of that industrial asset increases
Yeah.
because of all of the infrastructure that's sitting around that and the ability to get goods and services or goods, merchandise or whatever it may be, out of those industrial assets out to the broader population is going to be a lot easier, right, because of all of the infrastructure investment that's occurred around that. So both short-term gains from the Olympics, from what the Olympics is going to require, but then ongoing growth from the Olympics post the Games from all of the investment that's going to occur on the infrastructure for industrial. In terms of retail, I mean, when you spoke about some of the infrastructure from railway stations and all of those sort of things, that's just going to create this urban renewal within and around those areas, and retail assets are going to thrive as a result of that. And all of the additional population is going to create a greater need for retail goods and services, and naturally that's going to support tenant rental growth, therefore property growth as well. I was talking to the owner of the largest memorabilia company in Australia, and I've got a few retail assets myself, and he was asking if he could take up one of my tenancies in one of my retail assets because he wants to get into the memorabilia. He's not in the Brisbane market. He wants to get into this market right now and make the most of all of the things that are going to do with the athletes and the sports surrounding the games and build his local business out of that through the games. That's just one example of one business that wants to get in early and start now. He's looking for a lease from one of my properties to get in right now.
Here you go.
To start that journey. So both assets, I'm bullish on them both anyway, and I'm always bullish on them typically for the same reasons we're bullish on the residential market because of the undersupply, the cost of construction, the economy's growing, all of those things, but this is just going to continue to support that even more in the lead up to the event and continue to support that post the event as well. So plenty happening in that front. And could talk about it all day, Steve, as you know.
Yeah, and when we got a Hotspots episode, we try and keep it short and concise, but it's interesting. But I think one of the points you topped on, and I think it's a good idea for another pod at some point about this myth around sort of capital growth in commercial, how you can't have that. So I think we should unpack that at some point, and we will. And if I just one last question on this, if let's just say I was kind of a punter and I had 1.5 million to spend on a commercial asset, we're thinking of retail centre, like industrial, is that kind of what we're looking at where we can make the most use of that sort of Brisbane boom in sort of like this Brisbane area? Do you think we can, you're still seeing decent sort of opportunities around that sort of price point?
It's getting harder. It's getting harder because there's clearly more demand and the supply is not increasing anytime soon. But fundamentally, those two asset classes for cash flow and capital growth are very, very sound assets right now in the Southeast Queensland market.
Perfect. Well, there we have it. So if I just summarise here, hopefully we would have got a lot of a sort of benefit from this episode. So we've talked about the population factors of population growth that we're seeing in Southeast Queensland, Brisbane particularly. We talked about the impact of all the infrastructure projects that have come about via the Olympic Games that are coming up, obviously, until 2032. So we've kind of unpacked that a little bit. We've talked 3 suburbs. So we've talked inner city units in sort of Hurst and Newmarket, Kelvin Grove, etc. We've also talked about Petrie, the value potential, the value play there with houses on decent land. And then we finished off in Redlands Bay. We've also gone into the commercial property, looking at industrial and retail sort of centres there. A lot going on in Brisbane. People have got a lot of value out of this. Any last sort of things you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
No, it sounds good. I'm very enthusiastic on the market. So, looking forward to talking about it more moving forward. As we get closer to the game, Steve. Maybe we'll see you run down the 100-metre sprint race, eh?
Well,
so there you go.
Once upon a time, it used to be hockey for me. I see the field hockey's down in Labrador, and so I'll try and get some of those games. But it is exciting as a Brisbaneite, sort of like seeing what's coming and having such an amazing.
I was living through the Olympics in Sydney. It was phenomenal. It would change the atmosphere for. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
And just a shout out to my golf club, Royal Queensland. They're going to be hosting the Olympic golf, so having lots of Rory, Scotty Scheffler, and those guys, and I'll be sort of like working there as a marshal, so please no balls hit me. But that's going to be really exciting. Yeah. So Royal Queensland have got that gig as well. So it's been a great episode. I'm sure we're going to do another one of these at some point because it's obviously fluid. There's things changing all the time, but it's been great. And the next episode we're going to talk about is we're going to do deep dive into Bendigo.
Let's do it.
And that's coming up. So please stay tuned. That's coming in the next few weeks. But Bendigo with Tommy Clark on the spot here. Been a pleasure. Thank
Thanks,
you.
mate.
Cheers.